Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the podcast, episode 295, I might add, where we talk about the world around us and we ingest caffeine in our blood. Just kidding. But, anyways, my guest today is Jordan, Reason to Doubt. Introduce yourself.
My name's Jordan. I run the Reason to Doubt podcast, which is a podcast on skepticism and atheism. I run it with a friend of mine, Jared, who is a former almost preacher. He has his master's in divinity, and I'm a mechanical and nuclear engineer. So we tackle topics on both religion and conspiracy theory stuff. Do about an equal amount of both.
Cool. Yeah. I almost, back in my 20s, I thought about becoming a youth pastor.
Yeah. He was trying to be a chaplain for the army. And he was a month away from his graduation when he realized that he didn't believe in God anymore. It's right there.
Oh, it'll probably be a chaplain. When you're a chaplain, you have to be almost knows multi stuff. They have any amount of religious people in there.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than being a pastor in a normal sense because, like you said, there can be people from all kinds of different faiths and you need to support all of them. Interestingly, you cannot be a chaplain if you are not religious, though. You can't be a secular chaplain, which is a little odd when you think about what their actual job is, basically counseling and soldier support, which a secular person could easily do. But
yeah. There are those thin threads, I guess, that we still, the government and religion still has together.
Yeah.
So tell me about your podcast.
So my friend and I, Jared, we started it as we were transitioning out of the army because we used to talk about a variety of topics: flat earthers, young earth creationism, religion, philosophy, when we were doing training, and we thought that it would be cool to kind of keep doing that. So we started this podcast, and we're focusing it on skepticism because for us, while we are both atheists, our skepticism is far more important to us than our atheism. And we just want to kind of foster critical thinking and, credulity and apply that sort of skeptical lens to all aspects of our life. And so we do a religious themed podcast on the first of the month. And then we do a secular thing. So aliens or Bigfoot or whatever on the 15th. And here, the next couple episodes are going to be on young earth creationism because it kind of covers both of those segments, And I used to be a young earth creationist. So it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Hey, Brad, may we help you?
How are y'all doing today?
Doing well.
Yeah, this is awesome. My music producer, kind of last person.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, we have a local independent record label / musicians co-op right here in the Gem City, and it's called Vendetta Records, and our hashtag obviously is right there on my name, Vendetta Music 1. So it's pretty cool. I just figured I'd pop in. Lamont, we're going to get you some musical guests for that 300 episode that's coming up.
Oh, neat.
Cool.
Yeah. We're going to get you some cool people to perform and really kick it off with some gusto. So cool.
All right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yeah, so we're working right now. I'm working with a band out of Xenia, Ohio, in Yellow Springs area. They're called Glass, and we're working on a really cool song called Razor Blades, and it is going to be pretty cool. On top of that, some people don't know this, some people do, but when I was back in my 20s, I had a band, and my band was originally called Stinker. Then we changed our name to the Jaded Lights. Well, when I was with Stinker, Lamont was actually our photographer, and his nickname was the Stealth Photographer because he'd pop cameras off in your face and you'd have no idea where they were coming from. And he was really good at getting candid pictures. So I really, really appreciate all of his hard work. And he and I have just been friends for years, and we always try to help each other out.
Yeah, met in 5th grade.
Yeah. But all I'm going to say is there are some new Stinker tunes on the way with everybody from Stinker. So, yeah, all the people that keep asking me, I'm just going to say that get ready. There are going to be some bombshells coming. I don't know when. I don't have a time frame because, it just has to work right. But I will say that there are Stinker tunes coming. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if a certain YouTube host that I know wouldn't, possibly leak a song. I mean, that would be terrible for him to do that, being how strict copyright laws are and all this. It would be absolutely horrendous. If
as long as the owner of that song didn't sue me or copyright strike me, I think it'll be fine.
Well, you never know. No, I'm joking, but it might be really cool. So all I'm going to say is for those of you that ever pay attention to this, for those of you out in Stinker Mania land, all the fun we had and, playing sold out shows and just throwing everything I had at when I was 20, we still got it. We just grew up and got old and fat, but we still got it. And all I'm going to say is there will be new tunes coming and get ready.
Yeah. It's what announced that while he's still there. Announced that it's like 5 episodes away, give or take. How long it would take? Yeah, this is our 295th episode. Next week, 296 will be about the War of the Roses. 297 in 2 weeks will be about the Permian period of our geology. Permian period and the great dying that the Earth had, and then at that 3 episodes away from 300. So it's coming very soon, people. So
yeah, and I love the fact that Lamont is able to get so many cool guests on his podcast, people with all different backgrounds, all different creeds. And it's really, really cool, man. And I'm glad that you decided to be a guest on his show. He gets some really crazy people. One day I was on here with him and there was a YouTuber on there. And I had no idea, but after the thing had aired, I was like talking to her just like a regular person. And after his show had aired, I checked out her account and she had like 100,000 views and 100,000 followers. So I mean, he gets some very big quality people on here.
Gotta have connect. You just have to see that. Keep on seeing that feelers and connections and.
Yeah. Well, I was going to tell you real quick. The other thing is my old neighbors are very active on Instagram and they're selling all sorts of keepsakes and stuff. And they have their own business and they're very popular all over YouTube. I mean, they have a ton of followers for what they do and they do it for the right reasons. They make like memorial keepsakes and stuff like that. If you would like, I could get them on one of your shows. Just let me know.
Cool. By the way, before you go, did you hear back from the possible sponsor you talked about?
Yeah, he'll be. I talked to him pretty regularly, so I wouldn't be the least bit surprised because he said he was going to go talk to the guy. So to the guy that actually owns all the information. But basically, the way we're going to do it, they're not going to pay a whole lot of money, and we're going to advertise the heck out of them. Out of their product. So there's a gentleman I know that used to work for me, and his older brother sells a patented barbecue spice blend, and they're putting it all over the place. It's now in Kroger's. They're trying to get it in Walmart, but they're really big with it, and they've come up with a couple of different rubs and blends. And yeah, they're going to sponsor us, is what it sounds like. It's conversations going on. The guy who I've worked with before, I originally helped them build their first website when they were getting up and running, but now they're like they have a pretty big following. Jungle Gyms in Cincinnati, they sell it there, and they sell it at all these other places, Dorothy Lane Market, and a lot of really higher end grocery stores. And they're also selling it in Kroger, and I think they're trying to get into Walmart. But yeah.
So, hey, Jordan, do you like barbecue?
Of course. But what Virginian wouldn't love barbecue? No, I think
you're from the Virginians.
Yeah, I'm from Virginia. Though I have to say that I'm not a big fan of Virginia style barbecue. North Carolina is where it's at.
Oh yeah, sweet and smoky
with the vinegar base. That's my go-to.
But you know what? There's a secret barbecue that nobody talks about, and I would definitely put it in the upper echelon.
What's that?
Down in Cincinnati, yeah, right across from the Cincinnati Red Stadium, there's this place called the Montgomery Inn. And they have their own special barbecue sauce, and it's not like anything you've ever tasted before. It doesn't taste like Sweet Baby Ray's at all, or any of your typical barbecue flavor. It's a totally different flavor. It is a warm sauce, and they have some of the best ribs you'll ever eat in your entire life. And nobody ever talks about Cincinnati and barbecue. They talk about Cincinnati and chili, not barbecue. But I'm telling you, those guys bring their A game.
Well, if I ever find myself in Cincinnati, I'll be sure to look them up.
Absolutely, dude.
All right, we'll see you. See you for our 300th episode.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for letting me cut in there. Wasn't trying to disrupt, and I'll keep watching your broadcast. But thanks for letting me say something real quick.
Awesome. All right. So you were saying, so you said you used to be a YC. So what made you stop being that?
Well, I mean, in a word, evidence. About 10 years ago, 10 or 11, not sure exactly how long, I was talking to a coworker of mine about my belief in young earth creationism. He was Christian, and he didn't have a lot of good answers for the very scripted sort of things I had to throw at him. But he did give me a book. He was like, I'm not sure how to answer all your questions, but read this. And he gave me, the book was called Language of God by Francis Collins. And
I've been meaning to read that.
It's good. I mean, it's a little outdated now, but it's still a really good read. And it was instrumental for me because it gave me a lot of questions that it answered a lot of the objections I had, and then it armed me with better questions. And yeah,
people like that, make me that a lot of the YC people are try to divide. Try to divide the camp into you gotta be either a Christian creationist or like an atheist evolutionist, and Francis Collins is a Christian evolutionist. So it's like there's not a black and white line. It's just
I mean, there's the majority of Christians accept evolution, and it's no problem. Though we just recorded our podcast on young earth creationism yesterday. It'll be released in 2 days, and I talked briefly about a statistic from Gallup. So in 2 years ago, Gallup released a poll that showed that 40% of Americans espouse young earth creationism views, meaning that they thought that humans were created in their present form in the last 10,000 years, which like 40% is a lot of people, like a lot of people, so got a lot of work to do, I guess. But basically, at that book led me to just ask more questions, and then it was kind of a fighting retreat from there until I gave up the faith entirely.
Yeah, I was never a YC. I think I used to be an OEC because even as a young age, I knew about the old age of the Earth and stuff. It was books about dinosaurs, all that stuff, and trilobites, and I used to read those books in the library all the time.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I was homeschooled from like 6th grade on, and so all of the information I was getting was coming through creationist materials. So it was very much an echo chamber. So that's part of why I do what I do in my free time, is trying to reach me from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and like try to break through that echo chamber.
Awesome. So who are some of the YC people that you debated against some people or had to have some people?
Yeah, so I've debated probably Ken Hovind is probably the biggest name. I've debated him twice, though.
I'm sorry.
I'll say this: he was much more pleasant to debate than some other people I've engaged with. Nephilim Free comes to mind. That guy is not pleasant to talk to. He's not very polite, among other things. And that's all I'll say about it, so that I can remain polite. But Ken Ham, while I mean, it's whatever else you can say about him. He was charismatic and was.
I mean, Ken Hovind.
Sorry, yeah, I misspoke. I haven't quite punched up that high yet. No, Ken Hovind is very charismatic, and he was perfectly fine to me. I won't be engaging with him further because of his domestic abuse, and that's not something I want to endorse. But I've talked to, let's see, Team SFT, Standing for Truth, George Bond. What's the geologist they have on there?
Snowden?
No. What's his? I've got a book from him. McQueen. That was his name. Yeah, so I've debated several, and I'm sure I'll continue to debate more in the future. It's kind of it is kind of low hanging fruit, but it's the fruit that I like to eat, I guess.
Yeah. Is there really any high hanging fruit?
I mean, I guess among the young Earth creationists, you'd have the creation journal, the people who actually have degrees and are educated. They're a cut above. So you've got people like Andrew Snelling and stuff, and while they certainly make all kinds of mistakes, and it's some people question whether or not.
Well, Snelling, at least he has. I guess he had. I think doesn't he actually have some peer reviewed products? Not that we talked about, but yes, I think I heard.
He's published, and he has an actual bona fide qualification. He's certainly in the fringe minority, but he at least has some kind of qualifications to talk about what he's talking about. So, they're a very different sort of breed to someone like Altangelo or Nephilim Free, who don't have that depth of education, clearly. And it shows when you have to dig past, it's a mile wide, but an inch deep. If you dig past and dig into anything, you very quickly run out of knowledge.
Yeah, that's why I decided I'm not going to debate something unless I know the topic. I don't want to get my side of bad viewings.
Yeah, so the very first debate I did online, it was just talking about whether young Earth creation was true. And so I talked about radiometric dating and nuclear processes, which I'm not a radiogeologist, but at least I have some understanding of how radioactivity works. So that's something I know a little bit more about. And they talked all about biology, and I am not a biologist by any stretch of the imagination. And so anyone who's ever heard me debate has probably heard me say I'm not a blank a lot. I say I don't know a lot because I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know. And with enough advance warning, I could probably hold my own and not embarrass myself on a debate in a topic, as long as I'm not debating an expert. But yeah. I'm reluctant to do that because all I'm going to be doing is relaying to you what I read in a textbook or got from Dr. Dan or something. I don't have that understanding. If you want to debate biology, you should talk to one of them because they're the experts, right?
That's the problem. I think of. I don't know if you've had this problem or not. Ken Hovind has. We call it the Hovind hustle, but other people call it. I forget what the Gish thing, but
the Gish Gallop.
They talk about anything but the topic at hand.
Yeah. So with my personal experience with Ken Hovind, he was actually pretty good at staying on topic with me. But the Gish Gallop is a very common tactic, and for anyone who's not familiar, a Gish Gallop is where you just basically throw out claim with no evidence, because it takes a lot of time to address a claim.
Especially in a time debate.
Right. And you only have so much time. So what you have to do is you have to kind of pick points to address, because you're not going to be able to address them all, because he can spend 5 minutes and put out 50 claims, but you can't possibly address 50 claims in your 5 minutes. And so it gives the appearance that they're winning because they have all these claims that you didn't address. That actually comes out of young Earth creationism. Gish was a young Earth creationist, and he used this technique in order to put forward his views. But yeah, my experience with many people, not just young Earth creationists, but conspiracy theorists in general, is that they're very quick to assert things with just the lightest brush of evidence, and then breeze by as if that answered it,
Yeah, and also with Kent, that claiming stuff isn't isn't what it says it is. Like evolution, he has the Big Bang and abiogenesis and planets and stuff. Nothing to do with the actual evolution itself. He said they're all science, evolution, all this stuff.
Yeah, the evolution says, and then they talk about cosmology when evolution has nothing to do with cosmology. It's a lack of understanding of what the theory is and how, like, even though they paint a cohesive picture, if tomorrow we discovered unequivocal truth, unequivocal evidence that the first life was some deity or whatever, waved its magic wand and boom, life 4 billion years ago, evolution can just pick up from there. Like, evolution says nothing about where life comes from, and evolution says nothing about how the Big Bang works. Like, the two are just two different topics, but I think a lot of times, well, I know from my own experience as a young Earth creationist, the picture I got was this very us versus them sort of view. And, if it's not young Earth creationism, it's evolution, it's atheism, it's whatever, pick your label. And so I'm sure sometimes it's a honest tactic, but other times I think it's probably honest. It's just, misguided.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you had this. You're tired of this argument about how they always talk about cars or bicycles, or whatever, nothing to do with living things. Like, so you think a Chevrolet evolved from a Pinto Ford or something like that? Or...
Right. Like, if you see this car, then this car later, was that evolution, or you can go more general and do like the blind watchmaker. Like, you come across a car, do you assume it just came out of nothing or whatever, which, like, that's, it's fallacious because they're taking something we know for a fact is designed. We know because we did it within our lifetimes, right? We can go literally talk to the person who did it. And they're saying, well, this thing that we know is designed is complex and whatever. Therefore, this other thing that is complex must also be designed. And that's not necessarily the case.
And this is like you ever had sure. I'll believe that when I see cars having sex with each other.
Right. Cars don't have reproduction with modification, right? If cars had a method of reproduction with modification, then maybe we could talk, and if we invented some kind of artificial robotic life that could reproduce with modification, then maybe evolution could take its toll. But, we're not there.
So what do you do? So what do you do you have anything to do for fun, like play games, listen to music, or anything?
I'm a big gamer. So most of the time, if I'm not doing work or playing with the kids or something, I'm playing video games is usually my go-to. So yeah, lately I've been playing Total Warhammer. So I also play a bunch of RPGs.
Yeah, I love RPGs, and well, ever since I was since the 90s and 80s, but recently I've been into visual novel games.
Yeah, like what?
Danganronpa, Steins Gate, Phoenix Wright.
Is that the attorney one?
Yeah.
No, okay, cool. Yeah, I've been meaning to play that one.
Yeah. If you ever get into Danganronpa, I gotta warn you, don't get attached to the characters. It's very emotional draining.
I tend to kind of go in cycles. So like I'll play a few RPGs. Like recently I played what did I play? I can't even remember now. I should know because it wasn't that long ago. Anyway, I'll play like a big long RPG and then I'll kind of get burned out on that. And then I'll go to like more strategy or sometimes shooters. Yeah. And I kind of go in a cycle like that.
Yeah, I have shooter. I have never been a shooter game since the 90s. When I tried Doom in the 90s, I'm like, I sucked at it. So I'm like, no, shooters aren't my thing. The last shooter, sorry.
Most of the shooter I play, honestly, right now is I play Call of Duty with my friends. Like that's how we hang out. And at this point, my friends, like one of my close friends is in Florida, the other one's in North Carolina, so it's not like, and I'm in Virginia. So it's not like that's like how we keep in touch, basically.
Yeah, you know what the last shooter I was good at was? Duck Hunt.
I was okay at Duck Hunt. I was 5. And I used to get very, very angry at my sister because she would go up to the screen and like put her gun on the screen.
So did I.
And yeah, and I was like, that's cheating. And I would get very angry. And I didn't realize at the time, like, she's like 3. Like, yes, she could like.
Did you ever like do the cheat against her where you did that, but when you moved the second controller to move the ducks around?
No, I actually didn't even know that was a thing until much, much later.
I know. I used to read I used to read everything. I used to read instruction books like for days before I even played games. Sometimes like because back then the books were like actually almost storybooks.
Right.
Now that everything's in the web, so no books.
Yeah.
Here's the instruction manual for the thing. And
it's
internet now.
Crazy to me. Like the first game I ever had was Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo.
Oh, me too.
And now I have like a VR headset over there, and like just the distance that gaming has gone from when I was a child to where it is now is mind blowing.
Well, not just from here to now, but look between Mario Brothers 1 and Mario Brothers 3. That like 2, 3, like 5 years graphics wise.
Mm-hmm.
That little pixel Mario to actually tubby Mario.
Right.
But you ever heard of or played the Kingdom Hearts series?
I'm familiar with it, but I've never played it. No. It's not on PC, right? I'm pretty much
it is now.
It is now. I'm pretty much only a PC gamer. So I'm like, I played PlayStation growing up until like PS1 was my last one. And so like I played Final Fantasy all the way to Final Fantasy 9, but I haven't played any of the other ones because I just didn't have the right system. So now that they're being like kind of released on PC, I'm trying to like go back and catch up.
Oh yeah. Like when we were growing up, I know how old are you now?
36.
Oh shit, about 5 years younger than me. I'm 41.
Yeah, I got the big 4-0 almost here.
Yeah, so but yeah, God, I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, brain freeze. But yeah, RPGs and stuff like that. Mario, Zelda were my thing growing up.
Yeah, same here. I played a lot of it, like probably more video games than I'd care to admit. Like definitely in the thousands of hours sunk into video games at this point. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm usually doing board gaming. So I run D&D with my family, do that every week, and got a big board game collection over there. Basically, it has to do with gaming. I'm probably into it in some form or fashion.
You should like make a maybe an anti-YC or evolution based board game or video game, maybe.
Well, probably what I'd do is I'd make one like assuming it was true and then taking that to its logical conclusion and seeing what kind of insanity could come from there. I don't know. Escape from the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, sometimes even like even real science sometimes is kind of unbelievable. Think about it, because chemistry, for example, like we have hydrogen and oxygen, right? Both flammable gases. Put them together, water puts out fire. Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, now that I'm no longer religious, I'm much more fulfilled and kind of filled with a sense of awe about the universe because it works naturally. You know, like I think that the natural picture of the world is much more awe-inspiring than the magical one. You know, I think that the real, like how everything that makes up us or the heavy elements that make up you and me come from supernovae and from colliding neutron stars from millions and maybe billions of years ago. Like that's incredible to me. Way more incredible than, you know, a talking snake and two people in a garden 6,000 years ago.
Yeah. Also, salt. It's edible, but if you break it up and make it up salt into its two elements, they're both poisonous.
Right. Though sodium is a really good conductor. So it's actually used, or it's hypothetically could be used in nuclear reactors. There are some nuclear reactors that use sodium as their coolant because it's a metal and it's very good at conducting heat. Of course, it does have a big drawback, whereas if you get exposed to air, it catches on fire. And so that's not great. But
And also, speaking of evolution, sodium and all that stuff, it's weird, recently, not recently now, like this point, like almost like 10 years now, a little about the hierarchies and stuff, but how some animals you thought were related are actually just as far apart.
yeah, I've been trying to bone up on my biology. I made friends with Dr. Dan and Jackson Wheat, and they've been because I realized that growing up, obviously, I didn't learn practically any biology because I was a creationist. And so, like, we could learn physics, we could learn chemistry, but biology is kind of a no-go, And so that's just been a big hole in my education this whole time. So I've been desperately trying to backfill that massive hole in my education.
Yeah, like, even me growing up, not YC religious, like I was religious too, but no, not as indoctrinated as some people were, but like you grew up thinking that Dimetrodon was dinosaurs and stuff. But
were they not?
What?
Were they not? I don't know.
Oh no, the Dimetrodons are more like mammals related to us on our side of the family tree than they were dinosaurs.
Oh, today I learned.
So cool, yeah, Jackson. That, and then also that, like, tuna is more related to us than they are the sharks.
That would be surprising to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like all these different things, like birds are dinosaurs and all this other stuff.
That I did know, only because Dapper Dino has been like beating that drum every day of his life. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, so you said, what got you into nuclear power?
Well, I've wanted to be an engineer for a long time. I basically decided I was going to be an engineer at the age of 10 and never changed my mind since. I really love solving problems and figuring out how things work and analyzing things. And I'm pretty good at math, so engineering seemed like a natural fit.
You mean math still useful in everyday out of school life?
Oh yeah, all the time. I use math all the time, not just in like my professional life as an engineer. I use it in my own personal life all the time. Like I even use calculus sometimes. If you know something, you'd be amazed at how often you find ways to apply it, But in any case, so I'd already pretty much decided I'm going to be an engineer. And I went to Virginia Tech, and then life happened, and I had to put college on hold. And eventually, over the years, I ended up at where I ended up graduating, VCU. I was originally, when I went to Tech, I had planned to be a civil engineer. But because I walked into the mechanical engineering room, the kind of Q&A room, and everyone there was talking about cars, and I don't care about cars at all. And I was like, well, I guess I'm in the wrong room. Turns out mechanical engineering is a lot more broad than that. So when I went to VCU, they didn't have civil, so I just went mechanical, and I learned it was, anytime energy transfers from one place to another, whether it's a moving piston or if it's transferring heat or anything, that's all mechanical engineering. And as I was picking out my classes, I saw that there was an intro to nuclear engineering, which was a kind of a sub-major almost. It's very closely related to mechanical engineering, actually. But I was like, well, I have space in my schedule, and, I probably won't do it, but hey, I mean, what's the harm in finding out? And then I did the intro, and it was just like a whole new world. Like mechanical engineering is cool, but like nuclear engineering is just so cool. Like getting all of that energy out of such a tiny amount of substance, being able to power like whole cities on something that you can hold in your hand. It's just so cool. So that's why I got into it, because it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. And unlike, say, probably it's probably not going to be like a nuclear spill like there's oil spills or coal spills like that.
No, I mean, of course, we have our own class of problems, of course. Yeah. And anytime anything goes wrong in the nuclear industry, everybody hears about it. So, you'll have issues obviously Chernobyl is the big one, but that place was run with all of the care of a back alley meth lab, so that doesn't even really count. But like disasters like Fukushima, for instance, could still happen. The difference between that and like an oil spill is like nobody died from Fukushima from the radiation release. Obviously, the tsunami and earthquake that caused it was, that was bad. But yeah, you're not going to have wildlife like contamination from an oil like you would for an oil spill for most realistic radiological releases outside of something like Chernobyl. But even Chernobyl,
I heard that. I heard the animals there are growing back perfectly fine now.
Actually, they're doing better than they were before because it's possible that the elevated background radiation could increase their risk of cancer and maybe reduce their lifespan a bit. However, the fact that humans aren't there is actually really good for wildlife, and so it's actually kind of a de facto nature preserve. Now, I'm not saying that we should blow up nuclear reactors to make nature preserves. That's not a good idea. I'm just saying that Chernobyl, as it was horrible, absolutely terrible, completely preventable, but it wasn't like a nuclear bomb, I guess, is what I'm trying to communicate.
Oh, yeah. You can look around and see what happens when humans leave nature just does its thing. Like there used to be a car plant down the street from me, and half the things abandoned now, and the other half's working still. But the parking lot of the one side is practically like grass field now. The grass just took over the parking lot.
Yeah, nature finds a way, as long as we don't disturb it. And that's, I think, one of the big advantages of nuclear power as part of our larger power system. I don't think that 100% nuclear power is the way to go either. But because it has such a small footprint, its ecological impacts are very small. You don't need much mining.
Yeah,
you don't need hardly any area.
I guess that's the one bad thing about you talked about earlier, wind and solar. They're good overall, but then the mining of it takes up a lot of resources too.
Yeah, well, so if you look at greenhouse gas emissions over the entire life cycle of power source, nuclear power is close to the lowest. I think onshore wind is the lowest. They're all pretty low. Photovoltaic solar is higher because they need a lot of rare earth minerals. But I think that's something that a lot of people don't appreciate because they look at like a solar panel or a wind farm and they're like, how is that producing greenhouse gases? But the stuff that goes into those things didn't come from nowhere. Like you had to pull it out of the ground,
too bad we can't find a way to get that stuff from like less, I guess, greenhouse stuff, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you look at the graphs for all of the different power sources, whether it's nuclear or solar or wind, even offshore wind, like while there are variations, like if you compare them to gas, for instance, like it's a huge difference. And
True.
Gas is much better than coal. So like even if like photovoltaic solar produces a little bit more greenhouse gases than nuclear, it's still orders of magnitude better than fossil fuels.
That's true. Probably like when you're mining it might do bad stuff, but over the long run, once you get set up, then it bounces out.
And you have to look at the whole life cycle in order to really analyze something. And I think that touches on something that I find irritating as a skeptic who happens to be a nuclear engineer. Is I'm standing at this point where I'm pro-nuclear. Obviously, I wouldn't be a nuclear engineer if I wasn't. But anybody who tells you that their solution has no problems or drawbacks is lying to you or ignorant, one or the other. And so nuclear engineering or nuclear power absolutely has drawbacks. So does wind, so does solar. Everything has a drawback. It's about balancing those drawbacks, right? And so while I find it frustrating to hear the kind of fear-mongering that gets called out against nuclear all the time, and part of the reason why it's hard to do, I also get frustrated at the nuclear fanboys who won't admit that it has any problems. Like both of them are wrong,
So you said you also do conspiracy theories. Any conspiracy theories that you dealt with nuclear power that you've heard about?
Conspiracy? No. I've certainly heard a lot of false allegations, things like that we have no way to store nuclear waste, or that nuclear power can't be run safely, that it's likely to lead to proliferation and nuclear bombs. But I wouldn't necessarily call those conspiracy theories because they don't involve like a conspiracy. They're just wrong.
Oh, I thought maybe the government's telling how nuclear waste to kill us. We don't like obey the rules.
Nah, I haven't heard anything like that, though. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the Q conspiracy somewhere, because like any crazy thing is involved in Q somewhere.
Before, I don't know about you, but before I heard about this Q guy, whoever he is or she is, the only Q I ever knew about was from Star Trek.
Yeah, who's a much more preferable Q. I would definitely take the Star Trek Q over the Q conspiracy every day. So as part of the podcast, I've been like delving into different conspiracies. I've talked and kind of pseudoscientific stuff, Reiki and flat Earth and stuff like that. But Q just takes the cake. That is something else. Just to describe it, there is a secret world-spanning organization of Democrats who are Satan-worshipping pedophiles who consume the blood of children. What are you talking about? But there's people who believe it. There's a lot of people who believe it.
People that I used to hang out with believe it.
Yeah, it blows my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about other people talk nuclear power. That actually some you can get some. I don't know if you can actually get a use out of nuclear waste too.
Yeah, so spent fuel, which I usually use that word instead of nuclear waste, just because it differentiates between the waste that was from like nuclear weapons testing, which is not as useful. But when you're finished with the fuel that goes through the plant, it still has most of its energy in it. Because of the way we do fuel in the US, at least, it's called a once-through fuel cycle. And so you've burned a lot of the U-235, you've turned it into its various fission products, but there's still a good amount of U-235 in there, and of course all the U-238, which is the other kind of uranium. And so any use for depleted uranium, for example, would be one use, though I'd probably get that from the tails from enrichment. I wouldn't get that from the rod itself. But you could use depleted the spent fuel rods with reprocessing. You could turn them back into fuel, or I think more interestingly, you could actually use them as fuel, obviously with some reprocessing, for what are called breeder reactors. So breeder reactors are reactors that make their own fuel. They can take without getting too technical, there's fissile isotopes, that's the stuff that does fission, and fertile isotopes, that's the stuff that if it absorbs a neutron, it becomes fissile. So it gives birth to fuel, you can think of it, that's why it's fertile. And so when U-238 absorbs a neutron, it becomes plutonium-239, which is fissile. And so what you do in a breeder reactor is you give it some fissile material to kick it off. But basically you've got all of this stuff that would normally be waste, what's mostly the fuel rods and stuff, and that becomes fuel as it absorbs neutrons. And so you're burning up a lot more of the uranium. It's way more energy efficient, or more fuel efficient, I guess I should say. And you have less true waste at the end.
So you said the uranium turns into plutonium? Yeah.
So when uranium absorbs a neutron, because there's neutrons flying around the nuclear reactor, right?
And that's fission.
Well, okay, so there's two kinds of uranium. You've got uranium-235 and uranium-238, and they're called isotopes. And isotope are two the same element, just different amounts of neutrons.
Okay, before we go on, for those who don't know it, the 235 and 238 are the amounts of total of the neutrons and the protons in the nucleus. Those who don't know that.
Right. The number of nucleons. So the number of protons determines what element it is. The number of neutrons determines what isotope it is. So when U-235 absorbs a neutron, it will almost certainly fission. It'll split apart and release energy and neutrons. When U-238 absorbs a neutron, it can fission, but it's not likely. What'll actually almost always happen is it'll become it'll absorb the neutron. One of the neutrons will become a proton. I'm pretty sure it goes up. I think plutonium is up on the scale. And so it went from 238 to 239 because there's another nucleon now, and it's a different element. So actually, even in a normal fission reactor, about a third of your heat, once you're running and you've been running for a while, about a third of your heat will be coming from plutonium, not the uranium you started with, because the 238, the fertile material, has been absorbing neutrons and transmuting itself.
So is there anything besides the uranium or plutonium you can use for nuclear power?
Well, there are other useful elements you can get out of the decay chain, like molybdenum. I'm going to butcher that name. MB, I'm pretty sure its symbol is. There are medical isotopes, basically. One of the problems that we had in school, just as a toy problem, was like, we need to get this isotope out of the decay chain. How many times we need to pull it out of the reactor to do it? So like, there are useful things you could get out of it. But it's always a question of like, is it really worth it? Because you're not optimized to collect those sort of things, right? And in amongst anything that might be useful, you've got a bunch of stuff that's really bad and dangerous to be around, and so while I think most of the use you'd get out of spent fuel would be to reprocess it into more fuel, and once you're done with that, most likely you just bury the rest, would be what I would do.
Do you think it will ever get to nuclear powered cars?
It's funny. I don't know. Did you watch the thing I did with the 604 atheist like 2 days ago? It's hilarious because they asked literally the same question.
Nice.
So I would say that not only is the answer yes, we have them right now, and they're called electric cars. And so if you have an electric car and your grid is powered by nuclear energy, it's nuclear powered cars, just one step away. I know what you mean. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. I'm never say never, because who knows what future technology will bring, but I am skeptical at the usefulness of that, because especially if it's fission, maybe if it's fusion, perhaps, but the amount of like potential bad stuff that could happen having a nuclear reactor running in your car, like it just seems like like you've got fissile material in there, you've got like fission products. Like, what if you get an accident? Like, it just like, why bother with all that? Just keep the fission stuff over there,
Also, yeah, I heard that they're always going to be a long way away from fusion power.
Fusion power is 10 years away and always will be.
That's where instead of breaking the elements apart, they're smashing together.
Exactly. Right? And so if you have elements lighter than iron, then you get more energy when they fuse. And if you have elements heavier than iron, you get more energy when they split apart. So in order to produce... Go ahead. Sorry. You go ahead.
And that's why the iron is when stars think that the iron is the best they can do, and then the other stuff happens when the nova happens, right?
Correct. Exactly. Because up to iron, it gets more energy than it put into it, but past iron, it's losing energy. And so it couldn't use iron as fuel, because if it was fusing iron, it'd be losing more energy. It wouldn't be an efficient reactor. So you get iron out of high energetic collisions in novae and also from neutron stars, but it wouldn't be the nuclear fuel.
I was another episode. They talked about how there's a lot more like element like plutonium, radium, all that stuff in the ground right now that there is oil and stuff that it could last a lot longer too with supply of it.
Certainly, in terms of like the energy available, absolutely. Like, I don't know the numbers, but I would be shocked if they're not, just because the energy density of plutonium doesn't exist naturally, so there is no plutonium in the ground, but the energy density of uranium is so incredibly high. So A fuel rod in the reactor lasts about 3 fueling cycles, and each fueling cycle is about 18 months, year and a half. So each rod lasts like 4.5 years, right? And when they're going to refuel every 18 months, it's about a third of the reactor. And if you were just like to take out all the pellets and stuff, it could like fit in a van. Like it just doesn't need that much fuel, like in terms of mass. Obviously, it's very expensive and hard to process and everything. But
yeah, and also get more coal. All we get is a more oxygen-rich environment. Got plants to die without anything eating them, and 300 million years later, we'll have a lot more coal.
Yeah, I mean, if you wait long enough, we'll get more of that. Probably not great to burn it then either. Turns out. But yeah, I so real talk. In terms of energy efficiency, like it's hard to get more efficient. Like wind and solar have a huge advantage in that their fuel is free. Like can't be free, right? The sun just shines right down, right? No problem. But there are disadvantages when you have the entire grid powered by something intermittent. There's also possible concerns with spreading out our grid or like having to transfer power very large distances. So most of the available wind and solar is in the Midwest. And there is an advantage to having the source of your power close to where it's being consumed. And that's where I think things like small modular reactors, which is the new hotness in nuclear power, might possibly play a role. They're reactors that are could fit in the same places where we put coal and get natural gas plants. You literally just take out that stuff and put a small modular reactor in there if it works. They're going to be building one of the first ones in Idaho, I think.
You live in Virginia. I forget if that's where that thing was. I heard about this. Maybe it was Pennsylvania, but did you hear about the some kind of coal fire underground thing?
Yes, I've heard of it, but I don't remember any details.
Okay.
But I have heard of it.
Yeah, I heard about that a few years ago where like apparently they had coal mine caught on fire and the fire is still going on apparently.
Yeah, I know I have heard of it. I don't remember anything about it other than that it exists.
Yeah. I was sure if that was in your area or not. Oh, we have a question for you, I guess. Can you read it on screen?
Do I, this is from the Hermetic God, do I, Jordan, think naturalism is the default view? I think I'd say yes. And let me explain why. So I would like, unless you're like some hard solipsist or something who thinks we're actually like brains and bats or something crazy like that. Whether you're a religious person or not, we would all agree that the natural world exists, that it runs based on predictable patterns we call laws, and most things that we observe are due to those laws. Whether or not you think God exists, I think the vast majority of religious people would agree that we live in a world that most things that happen aren't because God did it, it's because, gravity or whatever, even if you think God did gravity. And so we already agree the natural world exists. So boom, naturalism or the natural world and its laws are here. Now, the religious person wants to add on top of that the supernatural, which is fine. Like you can posit that, that's no problem. They want to add another layer, another group of rules. And if you want to do that, then cool. We just need evidence to demonstrate that that's real. And until you can give me that evidence, then the right appropriate thing for me to do as a skeptic is to reject your claim that these supernatural things exist. And if I reject your supernatural claims, what am I left with? Well, I'm left with the natural. So I would say that kind of de facto naturalism, or kind of like naturalism of convenience, would be the default view. I wouldn't say that like a hard philosophical, there can possibly be no supernatural naturalism is the default view. That seems like a very harsh claim to make, and I'm not sure I'd make that claim. I'm perfectly open to there being a supernatural. I just need evidence of it. That's all. I used to believe in it, so I'm sure I could do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hope that answered the question.
Probably did. That's another question, but yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, for me, the slide away from the religious thing wasn't about the naturalism, because I believed evolution long before, when I was still going to church. For me it was more of the say the politics of it, and the gay bashing and all that stuff was more than the science part of it.
Yeah, I know for my friend Jared, the guy I do the podcast with, I know that a big part of what ended up pushing him completely out of the faith was him trying to reconcile what he felt was right in terms of including and respecting people who were gay or trans or things like that, and what he was finding in the Bible. Now, that's not to say I have Christian friends who are very open and accepting and very pro gay and trans, etc. rights. And so I don't want to say that like that's a necessary conclusion that anyone has to come to, but that was something that he struggled with and ended up he couldn't reconcile it.
Yeah, like I said, I grew up in a very democratic household, like the liberal, but we still went to church, But then after a while, the church views were telling us like, "Oh, you gotta vote for this guy because he's this." I'm like, "Why are you telling us to vote for people? It's like nothing to do with the Bible and stuff."
Yeah. I do find it interesting that just how broad Christianity is. I think it's a mistake that some atheists make, that they view Christianity as like this one thing, like this one monolithic thing, when in fact there's a massive amount of variety. You've got everything from charismatic Appalachian snake handlers, to the Ken Hands and Ken Hovens of the world with Young Creationists, all the way to a good friend of mine named Art, who's like a very liberal Christian pastor who's far more concerned with like, all I want to do is do the right thing. And Jesus, like, yeah, I think he was a god, but maybe he wasn't, but it doesn't really matter. Like, and everything in between,
Yeah, I know. Religion, like the religion second. Like, yeah, I've heard that everywhere. I think from Jesus was a liberal hippie, that people, and he was like a white conservative that hates black people.
Yeah, right. I personally, just as I get my biology from biologists and my physics from physicists, I try to get my history from historians. Yeah. And so I would probably, if I had to make a determination, I'd go with the Bart Ehrman, what seems to be the majority view, that he was a failed apocalyptic prophet of the first century, just like a lot of other apocalyptic prophets, who then got crucified because of his apocalypticism.
Yeah, I think, not saying he's true, real or not, this thing, but it's like if he was, he like people in that area are not European whites.
No, he would have been a Middle Eastern Jew because that's what he was. Yeah.
Well, like kind of like the Santa Claus myth review, like the first Saint Nicholas, like where he was from, it's like now it's like a fat white guy, I guess.
Yeah, hang on, just so I have this super fancy noise blocker, and I have it because my wife is like right above me, and I just realized I forgot to drop it down. So give me 5 seconds.
All right, well, while he's gone, anybody have any questions for him? And God, Brainbug, Ogre, Eddie.
Yeah.
So you have a noise blocker, you said?
Yeah. At the risk of ruining the stream. So if I go up, that's a bunch of panels on a movable thing that like hangs off of my wall. Nice. And it was because when I was gaming in the middle of the night, I was keeping people awake when I was yelling at other people. And so I built a frame basically that has a bunch of acoustic panels, and I can just drop it off of the wall. So I'm like in my own little cone of silence. Yeah.
Nice. Oh, I did. I have that problem right now. I'm living with myself, but yeah, that'll be awesome to have.
Yeah. Yeah. So, first century history has really been interest of mine, but I've always loved Roman history, and Bart Ehrman's books have really been a super good read.
But yeah, I love history like this too. That was another thing that got me away from, not away from IC, but away from criticism. Like history, like the flood, for example. You're thinking about, they say the flood happened like 4,000 years ago, give or take, right? Then I'm like thinking, then how did North Americans get over the land bridge 10,000 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, well, of course. You can not be a young Earth creationist and still be religious, like you were. You were an old Earth creationist. So, like, for me, my move away from religion was kind of like, okay, so I got away from young Earth creationism. And at that moment, I was like, okay, maybe I'm an old Earth creationist. But I made the determination as I was going through this deconversion process that I was just going to ask questions and find the answers, and I was going to follow the evidence wherever it led me. And I started like trying to disprove what I was believing over and over and over again. And every step of the way, every time I put something and said, okay, God has to do this, I found out like, okay, like, I don't know that God doesn't exist, but it doesn't seem like he's necessary for this step or for this step or for this step.
Yeah.
And it just kept going all the way further back until there just wasn't any room left, you know?
Yeah, same for me, but a little bit different, I guess. You try to go there, but there's still part of you holding on to your past religious, holding on to it, in the back of your mind. It's like, so, I know the Bible is accurate, so it has to be accurate, but so the flood had to happen, but the evidence here says North Americans were 10,000 years ago, so that must mean logically the flood happened before 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, it was certainly a difficult experience. I wanted to justify this faith I had because my religion was super important to me. I was 100% convinced that God existed and I had a relationship with him. And it was really hard to find out that I was wrong, like really wrong about a lot of stuff. I would have much preferred to have discovered that I was correct and God existed like I thought, but that just wasn't what the evidence was. I mean, I don't claim to know that God doesn't exist. That's not a claim I think I can make. For me, it comes down to what's the simplest explanation of the evidence that I have. And if I don't need to invoke a God to explain anything I see, then why would I? Like it's just an Occam's razor thing. Like there's no reason for me to invoke a God, just like there's no reason for me to invoke fairies or unicorns or anything else. I'm not saying that someone who believes in God is the same as someone who believes in Santa Claus, but like it's the same sort of logic. I don't need to invoke Santa Claus to explain presents under my tree, and I don't need to invoke God to explain morality or anything else I observe. Yeah. So why would I?
Yeah, really, the only person you probably invoke Santa Claus for it's like a 2-year-old niece or 2 or 3-year-old probably.
So, funny story on the whole Santa Claus and tooth fairy thing, fairies in general. So, even though I'm an atheist, I like to inject magic into my kids' lives, and so I used to like do the tooth fairy thing, and my kids would tell me, "Daddy, tooth fairy is not real," and I'd be like, "Well, how do you know? What's your evidence? What evidence do you have?" I was committing the argument from ignorance fallacy, but I was banking that they wouldn't call me out on it, and they'd be like, "Well, everybody knows, Dad," and I was like, "Well, that's not an argument. Like, that's not evidence, And that went on for a while, and then my middle daughter, Lexi, she said, came up to me one day, said, "Dad, tooth fairy is not real." And I was like, "Really? What's your evidence?" She said, "Well, I lost my tooth last week and I put it under my pillow every night here and at Mommy's house, and I didn't tell anybody. And if the tooth fairy was real, she would have known and she would have gotten the tooth." And I was like, "You got me."
Kids can be smarter than adults sometimes.
Yeah, I was like, "Well, you did the experiment. You have the empirical evidence. Good job."
So, by the way, for your time going that, what was the going rate for what was the going rate for teeth these days?
Let's see. I think we were doing like $1. I think that's what we were doing per tooth. I think so we do it for $1, and then the last tooth, when they like realize the tooth fairy isn't real, we give them like a $5 for that tooth, and then just that's it. You don't get any more.
Yeah, how much did you get back in the 80s?
Like $0.25, maybe.
Yeah. Is that
it wasn't much.
Inflation now?
Yeah.
Quarter to $1 now. 30-year inflation, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like speaking of 30 years inflation and stuff, I don't know, this argument. I just argument like the video games real fast. I heard this argument online, like people like I feel it was saying the graphics these days aren't realistic at all. The graphics totally suck. I'm like, okay, go play a 80s Atari Nintendo game and go see how graphics suck now.
Dude, I remember making the jump from Super Nintendo, Final Fantasy VI, to Final Fantasy VII with the big Popeye arms, and thinking, "Whoa, this is so realistic!" Like, yeah, they don't know what they're missing.
Yeah. Okay. 15 minutes. Okay. So, all right. So, oh God. So why do you think it is fusion be so hard to come by nowadays?
I mean, fusion is really hard. So, it's just really hard to do when you're not in the middle of a sun. So, the reason that fusion power is so hard, in case people aren't aware, is that like charges, meaning charges of the same type, positive and positive, they don't want to go together. It's like if you get two magnets that have the same pole and you push them, they resist, and it's really hard to push them all the way together.
Yeah, I see that all the time.
Yeah. Exact same thing is happening with two protons, which is what's in the nucleus. And you're trying to smash these protons together, and they really, really don't want to go together until you get them close enough, and then they'll come together and release a bunch of energy. That barrier is called the Coulomb barrier. And it's hard to overcome it. It takes a lot of energy to do it. So that's one problem. The other problem is containment. So usually this is done with gas, right? You're doing hydrogen or helium or something like that. And that's a very energetic, hot process. And what happens when you've got this hot gas? Well, it wants to expand, right? And so you have to contain this huge reaction but it's also going to be plasma. It's going to be extremely hot. So you need to contain it with something like a magnetic field or something that's not going to also get burned. And then you also have to put a bunch of energy. It's a very complicated, difficult problem to solve.
So you mean you don't want a little mini sun ball in the middle of your backyard?
Yeah, well, the sun has it easy because the reason it doesn't have a problem is because it's so heavy. It just pulls everything in, and it just like crushes everything under a massive amount of weight. That's why it works. But we don't have that luxury. If we had a fusion power that would be gravity induced, we'd have the sun. So, you can't put that in, a power plant. I don't know. Like I'm the amount of schooling I have on fusion is very small. We focused on fission almost exclusively. So, I'm not an expert on the fusion power production field by any means, but I know it's just a phenomenally difficult problem to solve. And even if they solve the problem today, we would be decades away from having an actual commercial power plant. So nobody should be thinking, oh, well, fusion will solve climate change. No, we need to solve climate change with the solutions we have today, right now. That's the only thing we've got because we don't have time to wait for anything else.
Yeah, that's the other thing that also worries people. Like, climate change doesn't matter because Jesus is coming back, so we wreck the Earth.
Well, okay, so let's put aside my atheism and everything. Let's just jump in. Let me put on my Christian hat. We were told to be good stewards of what we were given, right? And we were also told by Jesus that no one would know the day or hour when he would return, and we were supposed to live as if he was not. We were supposed to prepare as if he would never come, and live as if he'd come tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So if we're going to prepare as if he is never coming, we have to take care of the earth that we were handed by God. Like God has given us, if you believe in God and believe in the Christian God and his benevolent, he created this earth for us. What does it say that we took this gift that we've been given and we're trashing it? That doesn't say a lot of good things about us. And so it seems ungrateful, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Like, why should I give you a new heaven and a new earth? You didn't do good with the last one.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
So if you want to check out more of his stuff, can you link your site in the chat and I'll put it in the descriptions?
Sure thing. I'll put I have a YouTube channel. Obviously we're primarily a podcast. So, people, and you'll get all the links, but people can check me out on Podbean. We also mirror those on our YouTube channel, or you can go to Twitter, talk to me there. Press X to Doubt is my handle. So there's the YouTube channel. A bunch of ways to find me. And if you're interested in any particular kind of conspiracy theory or something you think might be interesting for us to cover, drop us a line and we'll almost certainly do an episode on it.
Before we go, what's your favorite conspiracy theory that you've had so far?
Do you mean favorite as in like the one I find most entertaining?
Yeah, I guess.
Or
either or.
It's a good question. I guess I'd probably have to go with Q just because it's so ridiculous. But it's also like that one's my favorite because of how ridiculous it is, but it's also got a bunch of racism baked into it. Yeah. I suppose if like I had to like just pick a conspiracy theory, like if I had to pick one, which one would I pick? I'd probably go Flat Earth, because those guys, I'll give them this, like they value empirical evidence. Their evidence is wrong. Their methodology is awful. They don't like accept it, like, but they at least give lip service to empiricism, right? Which I can respect. And at least they generally aren't saying like, you know, obviously racist stuff. They just think the Earth is flat, you know. So I mean, they seem kind of like harmless idiots.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think they're not the most dangerous conspiracy theories about to be the anti-vax people, I think.
Yeah, which actually is a big problem in the young Earth creationism movement, because there's a huge overlap between anti-vaxxers and young Earth creationists, because they've been telling their followers for decades that science can't be trusted, that, you know, they're lying to you, and now they're surprised that people are thinking that the science can't be trusted and they're lying to you, you know. But like you said, we've seen literally, I get asked sometimes, like, why do this podcast? Why does skepticism matter? Who cares, right? This is why it matters. We are seeing hundreds of thousands of people literally die because of a lack of skepticism. That's a problem. You know, that's a real issue. There are several 100,000 human beings that are dead today that would be alive if skepticism was better taught.
Yeah, also growing up, I always figured and thought that the anti-vax movement was more left side, like the natural medicine, like the holistic stuff, all that stuff. And all of a sudden nowadays it's more, you feel like it's more on the right side, the anti-vaxxers are. Like,
yeah, and I think that kind of just shows that conspiracy mindsets, it's not a right or left thing. You can have conspiracy theorists on both sides. Like right now, the right-leaning conspiracy theorists seem to be taking prominence, but that kind of mindset can infect anybody. So, you know, don't think that just because you're a, you know, God-hating liberal that you are immune to it, because you know, it preys on our flaws as humans, and we have to be perpetually aware of it.
So is there a lot of anti-vaxxers in Virginia where you're from?
So where I live in Richmond, which is the capital. So like where I am is pretty blue. So we don't have too much of a problem, though I do have some coworkers I know who are anti-vax. Like, so it's like I work in a department of like 20 people and like 2 of them are anti-vax. But if you get out into the more rural areas of Virginia, yeah, it's a big problem.
I'll think of history. Like, is there a lot of, I don't know if you heard that or not, was there a lot of Confederate monuments that got down last year and stuff from where you're from?
Yeah. So in my hometown, there's a street called Monument Avenue, and it was just monument after monument of Confederate statues. But yeah, during last summer, there's obviously the BLM protests, and that was a big focal point. So several of the statues got pulled down by protesters. The Lee statue just got removed by the government, and that's going to be disposed of or put in a museum or something. So we're slowly but surely clawing away from our racist past.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like, in my opinion, at least, statues are for honoring people. You should still learn about them in museums and history books and stuff. The statues are for honoring people.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with, like, if you want to preserve the history, okay, take the statue, put it in a museum within its proper context. You know, that's fine, because if it is a historical monument. But in fact, most of the statues were produced in the early 20th century as a message to Black people. Like, they had nothing to do with the Civil War, you know? So yeah, it's not like
the lost cause myth movement thing.
Yeah, it's not like we need a statue to teach about the Civil War. We should absolutely be teaching about the Civil War, but we don't need a statue in the town square to do that.
I brought this up, but you should turn on statues, their history. I'm like, then why did we turn on a statue of Saddam Hussein after we invaded Iraq, or the statue of King George in the Revolution?
Why is there not a statue of Hitler? Like, why don't we just? I mean, if we need statues to teach history, why don't we have a statue of Hitler? Why? Because that would be awful. Because he's a terrible person. Well, that's why.
But yeah, okay, like I said, his links are description below. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, the being. So be sure to check him out.
Oh wait, hold on. That last one's my personal Facebook. I just realized. Let me get you the reason to doubt one. Sorry, that's my mistake. Not like I'm trying to hide my identity or anything, but it's just the wrong link. There you go.
Okay, I will erase that from the description and put the real.
I think they could definitely find me if they wanted to, but like that, they're not going to get skepticism there. They're going to get politics.
Okay, here's the real one. Check it there fast. Yeah, that's a big problem with sometimes YouTube keeping your personal and your public stuff separate sometimes on YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff. Like,
yeah.
All right. Well, so do you have anything you want to advertise on your future coming up?
Well, we'll be releasing an episode on young Earth creationism tomorrow, and we'll be doing another one on the 15 days later, so on the 30th of the 1st. So if you find the whole young Earth creationism stuff interesting, we'll be talking about radiometric dating and the heat problem and why it shows conclusively that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. So,
well, if I get time off of work, if I can get my phone off of work or something, I'll definitely check it out. Yeah, like for me again, next week, me and the Venerable Bear, we're talking about the War of the Roses. You've heard about that before?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And the recent past, and then after that, next week after that, we're going a little bit further back to the Permian.
I mean, in the scale of the universe, it's not that much further back,
On the scale of YEC, it's a lot.
It's a lot further back, yeah.
So, do you have any like catchphrases that you say before when you sign off on your podcast?
Remember, until next time, you always have reason to doubt.
And as I always say, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. We'll see you next time. Bye.